Death. It's the one mystery none of us can avoid. No matter who you are, no matter how much money you have, no matter how many salads you eat or how many kale smoothies you choke down, the end comes for all of us. And yet, for thousands of years, humans have stared into that unknown and asked the same question: what happens when we die? Do we pass into another world? Do we float among the stars? Do we simply fade into nothingness? Or, my personal favorite, do we finally get answers to all the weird little mysteries in life? Like, what happened to all my missing socks, and why do remote controls always disappear exactly when Netflix gets good? This question, the question of the afterlife, has shaped religions, philosophies, wars, peace treaties, and entire civilizations. Because depending on the answer, everything about how we live changes. Tonight, we're going on a journey. We'll explore the religious and spiritual explanations, the scientific theories, the paranormal encounters, and the philosophical ideas. And somewhere in all that mystery, maybe we'll catch a glimpse of the truth. So settle in. Turn off the lights if you dare, and let's dive into the unknown. Religious and spiritual views of the afterlife. Humans have always searched for meaning in death. And every culture has its own explanation, some comforting, some terrifying. Ancient Egypt, preparing for eternity. If you were an ancient Egyptian, dying wasn't the end. It was the start of a long, long trip. And they took it seriously. Egyptians believed in the Duat, the underworld, where your soul had to face trials before reaching paradise. You'd meet gods like Osiris, and your heart would be weighed against the feather of Maat, the feather of truth. If your heart was heavier than the feather because of sins, sorry, your soul got devoured by a monster called Ammit, part crocodile, part lion, part hippopotamus. Basically, the ancient world's version of game over. On the other hand, if your heart passed the test, you entered the field of reeds, a heavenly paradise that looked a lot like Egypt, but with no pain, no suffering, and probably no taxes. Imagine spending your life building pyramids under the desert sun, and your idea of paradise is just more Egypt. No offense, but I'd at least want air conditioning. Hinduism, the cycle of rebirth in Hinduism. Death is just one stop on the eternal wheel of samsara, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Your actions in this life, your karma, determine what happens in the next. Do good. You might come back in a higher form, maybe even closer to spiritual liberation. Do bad. Well, let's just say you might be coming back as a mosquito. Or worse, a DMV employee. The ultimate goal is moksha, breaking free from the cycle and reuniting with the divine. It's a fascinating way to think about death, not as an ending, but as a doorway to another chapter. Buddhism, letting go, similar to Hinduism, Buddhism teaches about cycles of rebirth. But the focus is more on escaping suffering by reaching enlightenment. The Buddha described death as a natural transition, but if you're enlightened, you don't come back. You dissolve into nirvana, the ultimate peace. One Buddhist monk explained it this way: when a candle goes out, where does the flame go? It doesn't vanish, it simply transforms. Unless, of course, it's one of those birthday candles that keeps relighting. Then you're stuck in samsara forever. Christianity, heaven, hell, and judgment. In Christianity, death brings you before God for judgment. The faithful may enter heaven, a place of eternal peace and joy. The wicked face hell, a place of separation from God, often described as fire, darkness, or endless suffering. Some denominations also believe in purgatory, a middle ground where souls are purified before reaching heaven. Christian imagery of the afterlife has deeply shaped Western culture, Think pearly gates, fiery pits, angels, and demons. Whether literal or symbolic, it paints a clear picture. Your choices in this life matter beyond the grave. Islam, the bridge to paradise, or the fire. In Islam, death is followed by the barzakh, an intermediate state until the day of judgment. Then every soul crosses the Sirat bridge, thinner than a hair, sharper than a sword. The righteous pass safely into Jannah, paradise, described as lush gardens with rivers of milk and honey. The wicked, however, fall into Jahannam, hell. It's both beautiful and terrifying imagery, reminding believers to live with faith and righteousness. Native American beliefs, many Native American traditions view death not as an ending, but as a transition into a spiritual realm that exists alongside our own. Some tribes describe crossing a spirit river where ancestors wait on the other side. Others speak of the soul traveling to the happy hunting grounds, a place of abundance and eternal harmony. Death wasn't feared so much as respected. It was just another step in the great circle of life. From Egypt to India, from Europe to the Americas, humanity has created beautiful, strange, and powerful visions of the afterlife. What's fascinating is how many of these beliefs share similar themes: judgment, transformation, and the continuation of the soul. It seems no matter where you go, people struggle with the same question: what comes after? But belief is one thing. What about science? What does the modern world say about death? Well, get ready, because that's where things get really interesting. Religions offer answers rooted in faith. But in the modern world, science has stepped in, determined to explain what happens when we take our final breath. And while science has revealed incredible details about the body, the mind, and even consciousness, the truth is, the mystery isn't solved. Let's start with the most basic question. What happens to the body when we die? The biology of death. The shutdown sequence. When your heart stops beating, blood stops flowing. Within seconds, your brain is starved of oxygen. You lose consciousness and brain activity plummets. Cells start dying and the organs slowly shut down. Doctors call the official time of death when the heart and lungs permanently stop. But here's where it gets weird. Death isn't always instant. In fact, some cells in the body keep living for hours, even days. Skin cells, bone cells, and even sperm can survive well after the heart has gone silent. Joke drop. So basically, even after you're dead, your body's like that one friend at a party who refuses to leave. The lights are off, the music's stopped, and they're still in the kitchen making nachos. The brain's final fireworks. One of the most fascinating discoveries in recent years is what happens in the brain at the moment of death. Researchers have found that just after the heart stops, the brain sometimes shows a massive surge of activity, almost like a final burst of electricity. In some cases, it looks similar to patterns seen when people are dreaming or recalling memories. This could explain why so many near-death experiences involve vivid visions, life flashing before your eyes, bright lights, or feelings of peace. The brain, in its last moments, might be giving us one final show. Some scientists even suggest that these last bursts of activity could last minutes, meaning for you, in your perception, those final moments might stretch into something much longer. Near-death experiences. Now let's talk about near-death experiences. Across cultures, people who've come close to death often describe astonishingly similar things: moving through a tunnel toward a bright light, a feeling of peace, warmth, and detachment from the body, encounters with loved ones or spiritual beings, a panoramic review of their life. These reports come from children, adults, doctors, atheists, and deeply religious people alike. One famous case is Pam Reynolds, a woman who underwent a rare brain surgery in the 1990s. Doctors drained the blood from her body, stopped her heart, and chilled her to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. By every measure, she was clinically dead. Yet when she was revived, she reported floating above her body and accurately described surgical tools and conversations happening in the operating room. Scientists call this anomalous perception, but they still can't fully explain how she experienced it with her brain offline. Personally, if I floated out of my body during surgery, I'd probably just start yelling at the doctors, "Hey, don't you dare leave a sponge in there. I've seen the lawsuits." The science versus the mystery skeptics argue that NDEs can be explained by lack of oxygen to the brain, or by the release of chemicals like DMT, which is known to create intense hallucinatory experiences. And yet, these experiences are often reported as being more real than real. People come back forever changed, with less fear of death and a deeper sense of meaning. If NDs are just brain chemistry, why do they feel so profound, so life-altering? That question remains wide open. The study of consciousness, this leads to perhaps the biggest scientific mystery. What is consciousness? We can measure brain waves, map neurons, and even simulate parts of thought with artificial intelligence. But no one truly knows why we have an inner experience, the me inside the mind. Some scientists argue that consciousness is simply a byproduct of the brain, like steam from a boiling pot. Once the brain shuts down, consciousness vanishes. Others propose something much stranger, that consciousness might exist beyond the brain. In this view, the brain isn't the creator of consciousness. It's more like a radio receiver, tuning into a greater field. If that's true, then death may simply be the moment when the radio turns off, but the signal continues. Which honestly makes sense because my brain feels like it's on the wrong station half the time anyway. Static, ads, and the occasional 90s pop song. Resuscitation cases, the back from the dead files. Another scientific puzzle comes from people who've been clinically dead, but revived. In some rare cases, people have been dead for minutes or even hours before being brought back through CPR, hypothermia, or advanced medical tech. One remarkable story is of a woman named Anna Borgenholm from Norway, who in 1999 fell into icy water and was trapped under for 80 minutes. Her body temperature dropped to 56 degrees. Her heart stopped and she was declared clinically dead. Yet doctors managed to revive her, and she went on to recover fully. Cases like this raise questions. If someone can be dead for over an hour and come back, what exactly does death mean? Is it an instant, or is it a process we don't fully understand? Theories about consciousness after death. Here are a few of the most fascinating scientific theories about what might happen. Biological end. Consciousness ceases when the brain shuts down. Death is the end, like a light turning off. Quantum consciousness. Some researchers, like Roger Penrose, suggest consciousness might be tied to quantum processes in the brain, meaning it could, in theory, persist beyond death. Information theory of the soul. Some theorists argue that if consciousness is information, maybe it can't be destroyed, only transferred or transformed. Simulation theory twist. If reality is a simulation, death could be like logging out. Which, if true, I want to speak to the programmer, because this game has way too many microtransactions. Science has uncovered astonishing details about the dying process. Surging brain waves, near-death visions, even people coming back from hours without a heartbeat. And yet, for all our technology, the mystery of consciousness remains unsolved. Which means, even from a scientific perspective, the door is still wide open to possibilities. But while science debates theories, there are also countless stories from ordinary people, paranormal encounters that suggest something lingers after death. And that's where we're headed next.